Welcome back to another episode of the Meat Mafia podcast. If this is your first time joining us, we have one goal and one goal only, and that is that you, yes, you, listen to this podcast and get at least one valuable piece of information that inspires you to go radically change your health today. If this is your second, third, fourth, or 100th time listening to the Meat Mafia podcast, we are so grateful to have you, and we are so thankful for your continued support. Before we get going, if you would not mind going and following us on all of our platforms, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and of course, Twitter, we would greatly appreciate it. This just allows us to expand our reach, and your reviews, comments, and feedback give us more and more things to think about and improve the show with. Lastly, this is a user-supported podcast and newsletter, and we would not be able to do what we love doing without your generous support and the support from our sponsors. We take great pride in the relationships that we've built with our sponsors and truly believe that they are the best resources out there for better health. Your support and their support, and you supporting them, means the world to us. If you are enjoying the podcast and getting value out of it, please check us out on the Fountain app below, where you can support us by streaming us sats or sending us support via our Fountain Bitcoin wallet. Without further ado, here is a word from our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Carnivore Bar. The Carnivore Bar is a veteran-owned, animal-based company focused on bringing you the highest quality pemmican product on the market. Pemmican is an ancient tradition practiced by American indigenous cultures, and it's focused on simple ingredients: beef, tallow, and salt. It's built for grab-and-go snacking, and it's a great sort of travel, hiking, or school lunch snack. And it's really built for those long-lasting days where you can just run on basically no fuel other than just simple fats. It's rich in saturated fats and provides everything you need to sustain long-lasting energy throughout the busy day. In my opinion, this is a product that is an absolute must, so go check it out in the link below. Also, check out our podcast with the founder, Philip Meese. He does an incredible job breaking down the mission and the passion behind the company. And I think if you're interested in animal-based nutrition, Philip will inspire you with his product. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Holy Cow Beef. Holy Cow Beef is regeneratively raised, grass-fed, grass-finished beef raised right here in Lubbock, Texas. Regeneratively raised, grass-fed, grass-finished beef is the gold standard of beef, and Ann and Weldon Warren have made it their lives' mission to provide incredibly high-quality beef to their local community and beyond. They have been raising their animals this way for decades. In fact, they were some of the most influential voices for getting grass-fed and grass-finished beef in Whole Foods back when Whole Foods was a startup grocery store. They were influential in setting the AGA standards, which is the American Grass-Fed Association, so you know they are doing things the right way, and on top of all of that, their beef tastes like butter. Grass-fed, grass-finished beef provides a superior omega-3 to omega-6 ratio than your typical beef, or in other words, it causes less inflammation in your body. So you are promoting a high protein, high fat diet with this amazingly high quality beef, and saturated fats are playing their critical role in benefiting your body through supporting hormonal functions and cellular functions. And if you're looking for the highest quality beef, look no further than Holy Cow Beef. Leave your butcher box, that Australian and New Zealand raised meat, in the cart and order from your friends Ann and Weldon Warren over at Holy Cow Beef. I almost forgot the most important part there. Ann and Weldon Warren also accept Bitcoin as payment, so go check them out at their website in the link below, and you can pay in Bitcoin or in cash if you're looking to save your Bitcoin. I don't know about you all, but I am all about rewriting the incentives when it comes to healthcare, and Crowd Health is doing just that. Crowd Health is essentially crowdfunding for healthcare with a small HSA component mixed in. Paying through the nose for health insurance you may never use, only to be turned away when you actually need it, is incredibly frustrating. Also, the exorbitant costs of health insurance has so many baked in premiums that when you compare settling your doctor's bills by paying in cash versus using insurance, the cost is astronomical. So crowdfunding allows you to settle your medical bills in cash and then get the funding you need from your group through Crowd Health. This is a great alternative to health insurance for people who are low risk, healthy people who just want peace of mind knowing that if anything actually did happen, they do have a pool of funds to pull from to cover their medical costs. The best part, my group is saving a portion of the monthly opt-in in Bitcoin, and the rest is in cash. So those savings are going towards actually preserving long-term value for my group through a vehicle like Bitcoin. We are really excited about this concept, and since the business model is predicated on an incentive-based healthcare, it is a great concept. For people with low risk, minimal healthcare costs, it is a no-brainer. Go check them out in the link below and use our promo code MAFIA for a discount on your first 6 months with Crowd Health. All right, we're rolling.
Awesome.
Well, Calley, how's Austin treating you? Enjoying your podcast tour?
Well, as I was feeding my son on, I think, January 3rd and ripping out a quick tweet on the corrupt food system, I was not expecting to be doing this and Tucker Carlson and doing a bunch of podcasts, but it's been gratifying. I think it's an important message, and I'm honestly surprised it resonated because I thought it was so obvious the system's rigged, but it does seem to be resonating. I think people are frustrated and trying to figure out what's going on with 25% of kids now having prediabetes and 50% of Americans having prediabetes or diabetes.
We were checking the statistics on that tweet prior to us sitting down, and I think it has like 57,000 likes, millions of impressions. It's probably just unbelievable just to see the impact of what putting some content out on the internet can have.
It really, it's fun, and those statistics are great, but it's like, it sounds corny, but I really am gratified that it seems to have given a voice to some people. The crazy thing for me is that I've gotten hundreds of messages from moms, and that's who's really it seems to resonate with.
Really?
I think when you look at a kid's classroom right now and the rise in allergies, the rise in autoimmune conditions, obviously the rise in overweight and obesity, I think there's real frustration among parents. I have a new son, and it is scary, and it's just like something is going on with nutrition. So it seemed to resonate, particularly among parents, which is cool.
What sort of feedback are you getting from those parents? Like, are you getting kind of similar questions across the board, or is it more like widespread types of questions?
Yeah, I think we eventually get to what we need to do, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But I think what's resonating is identifying the problem. This is my kind of theory from what I'm seeing, is that I think the American patient, the American parent, has been gaslighted to not ask questions. This idea of trusting the science, this idea that you're a fringe wacko for trying to self-diagnose or go outside of our traditional medical system. But at the same time, we've been getting exponentially sicker, more depressed, more infertile. I mean, male sperm counts plummeting, PCOS, leading cause of infertility, is going up, and more depressed. And I think when all these things are happening and we're being told not to ask any questions, I think people are starting to wake up. And so I think that's the first thing. It's like, it's okay, to question your pediatrician as they're saying that the kid should be taking a bunch of antibiotics and a bunch of drugs and, a bunch of processed food, which is literally the guidelines that pediatricians give. When the American Academy of Pediatrics now is saying that 12-year-olds who are obese, which is 25% of teenagers, should be getting an injection instead of eating healthy. I mean, I think there's a license now that people can kind of wake up and question incentives. And that seems to be resonating. I think that's important to establish that, and then we can talk about answers, because there are definitely some answers.
Why don't we unpack the tweet that you put out, because it was incredibly powerful. I think something along the context of, with food stamps, I think the budget for that is $110 billion, if that's correct.
Right, that's right.
10% of that budget is going towards soda-related beverages, and you basically unpacked the exact playbook that you saw that Coca-Cola utilizes to keep that 10% number. That was the way that I interpret it, but would love to just hear from your perspective.
Yeah, I think this gives a very kind of tactical playbook of what's happening time and time again. And I think it's very instructive. So 2012, the ag bill is up, the farm bill. And again, as you said, 15% of Americans depend on the food stamp program for nutrition. 10% of that goes to sugary drinks. And I don't think there's any scientific disagreement. Sugary drinks are an absolute bomb for glucose levels, very little nutrition. It's absolute disaster. An average child today in one 20-ounce bottle of Coke ingests as much sugar as they did in a year. Just 100 years ago.
Wow.
I mean, and it's actually much more weaponized in liquid form. So it's obvious. I don't think anyone's really scientifically disagreeing. Shouldn't be subsidized in a nutrition program, but it's a material part of Coke's revenue. Again, over $10 billion of food stamp money is spent on these sugary drinks. So how does Coke keep the status quo? And the key is you weaponize systems of trust. You weaponize these institutions that, an average American or just any American, relies on. So the first is the civil rights organizations, the NAACP. So Coke went to the NAACP. And what was shocking is being in the room, the conversations were very transactional. It was literally like across the table, we're going to pay you millions of dollars and you're going to call our opponents racist. And calling someone racist shuts down the debate.
Yes.
And they know that. And these are, the optics were crazy. It was these white, PR executives telling the NAACP who to call racist, and then in exchange of funds of millions of dollars. And as the New York Times reported, that really did shift the debate in 2012. There was an absolute onslaught. And the people that were being called racist, the people that were being shut down were parents concerned about their kids ingesting 100 times new sugar. So that's one. And it was pretty dispiriting to see. Number two is think tanks. So that's a very big deal in Washington, D.C. Think tanks are, the budget of the Heritage Foundation, who I've called out, is $100+ million a year. These are real PR influence organizations that if their weight comes down on you, it's a big deal. And I grew up conservative. I interned at the Heritage Foundation. It's the gold standard for conservative think tanks. And it was dispiriting, early in my career after working in politics, really trying to get in it for the right reasons, seeing that everyone after campaigns goes into consulting and inevitably consults on both sides of the aisle for food and pharma. We go into these think tanks that I really admired, and it is a direct transaction. It is like going in and ordering a Big Mac at McDonald's and I want pickles on it. It's that blatant. You call up a fundraiser at the Heritage Foundation. They tell you kind of what's going to happen. Then you go in and meet with a scholar and talk high level with the Coke executives or the pharma executives. And then you walk out and the fundraiser gives you a wink and there's an exchange of funds. So the Heritage Foundation pounded this, right? They're like, oh, these patriarchal policies of these people trying to tell lower income people what to eat, even though the rig system is actually paying tens of billions of dollars for this food. So that was another big one. And then the last one we can unpack more, but I'll go over it quickly, is research institutions. Now, I think you guys have hit on this, like we've talked, but it's still shocking to me how unimpeachable people see a peer-reviewed study. You have a news article about a peer-reviewed study from an institution like Harvard. Well, that's the end of the debate. It is so easy to dictate what's studied and what questions are being answered. And I just think it's very instructive, right? The 1990s food pyramid that I think is the most disastrous public policy potentially in United States history. I mean, the deaths and cost that came from recommending more carbs, right? Less healthy fats, have been in the trillions of dollars and millions of lives. And that was the foundation of that research was Harvard research, which was directly paid for by sugar companies. And you'd think that's over, but today, right, the leading preeminent study from the NIH right now is the Food Compass from Tufts, millions of dollars funded by the NIH, and it's telling us Lucky Charms are healthier than eggs and Honey Nut Cheerios are healthier than beef. It's like it would be funny if that wasn't then being weaponized to influence our kids' meals. Yes. And yeah, Coke has a list of nutrition experts at Tufts, at Harvard, at Stanford, and you have PR executives in Washington, D.C. Dictating nutritional research, and you have Coca-Cola and processed food companies funding 11 times more for basic nutrition research than the NIH. And anyone who thinks the billions of dollars that processed food and pharma companies spend donating to research at universities, that's out of a philanthropic goodwill to advance, non-ideological scholarship, they're not correct.
Equip's unflavored Prime has one single ingredient derived directly from grass-fed beef protein. For purists like ourselves who try to only consume balanced, real sources of nutrition, this protein powder checks all the boxes. Go check them out in the link below and use our promo code in the description to get a discount. One of the reasons we were excited to have you on the show is because you've been behind the curtains of a few of the institutions that you just mentioned. So you went to Stanford and Harvard, and then you've also worked at Coca-Cola and seen what happens behind the scenes. And it you use the right word, right? Like incentives kind of drive the behavior, and the playbook is almost like doubling down on offense so hard that it's just like they're trying to defend from all angles and then aggressively fund these types of initiatives that skew public perception on like what's real, right? There's this gaslighting. How do you perceive like whether that's like out of just trying to fund the bottom line and get the profits, or is it nefarious in other ways as well?
I think it's a really important question because it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's we know people that work in pharma. Many of my friends from business school work in pharma, work in food, work at Pepsi, right? We know our doctor; they're not bad people. So I think we got to unpack that a little bit. I think we really got to be clear, and I have a strong opinion on that from seeing inside these rooms. Even the executives at the NAACP hatching this very transactional racial strategy, they are not looking at, it's not an evil conspiracy in their heads, right? Everyone, and I think I'm a free market guy. Coke should exist. Pharma should exist. Like they should even be trying to rig the system if they can, but we've got to call it out. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist, but the fact is the incentives of the $4 trillion healthcare system, the $6 trillion food system is to grow.
Yeah.
And it's no one person, but I think the beauty of the system in a way is that it's convinced everyone they're doing the right thing. So the Coke executives really do legitimately feel, many of them, like they're feeding people. And the pharma executives really do feel like they're helping people. If somebody is like, massively obese, diabetic, like really on the verge of heart, they probably do need a drug. The problem is the link. The problem is that the food companies, aren't responsible for health. They've made food more addictive. The foundation of our diet is highly processed grains, which turns into sugar, which is addictive, which was created just 100 years ago. Seed oils, which are inflammatory, make the food more addictive, invented just 100 years ago, and added sugar, which really didn't exist 100 years ago. The basis of our food, evolutionary, we're not able to meet, to process, and it's highly addictive. And that's good for food companies. So they're not responsible for the health. They've done that. Food's become much cheaper, right? And more processed. You take the processing of the grain takes the fiber away, so it's shelf stable, but that makes the sugar impact much higher. So that's food. The problem is then the pharma and the hospitals and all these other institutions, they're there to pick up the mess. They're not taking responsibility for the fact that everyone's getting sicker. So they're like, oh, we're doing a great, because there's these lazy humans are eating their McDonald's, their processed food, and we're cleaning up the mess. So they, in their heads, but the problem is nobody's asking why people are getting sick. Like there's no incentive. Yeah, so that's one of the problems, and that's why it's important. I think people are waking up, the books, podcasts, people wearing biowearables and seeing things that aren't making sense. But we've got to understand this devil's bargain. It's like we're getting sick from food, and then nobody's there to ask why.
I think you touched on a really important point about the mindset of corporate executives at Coke and these big food companies, because that's something that Harry and I spent a lot of time kind of pinballing back and forth, and just we ask ourselves, are these guys evil? How do they morally justify what they're doing? Understanding that they're selling a product that's probably causing, terrible metabolic health outcomes, but it sounds like they are able to justify it and say, okay, we're feeding the world, or hey, we're donating to maybe some of these nonprofits or something like that. I'd love to just unpack the mindset of some of these executives that you worked with and, how they kind of view what they're doing.
Yeah, so I think it's changing. We can talk about that in a second, but this still is predominantly the mindset. At the Heritage Foundation, it's like we're fighting taxes. They're getting paid by Coke, but we're fighting. The problem is that they determine what to fight based on who they're paid. And actually, sometimes you can pay the Heritage Foundation if you're trying to get a preferential tax, and they've labeled things as not a tax. So it's like what they're even fighting is paid for, but it's like somebody there is I'm ideological. These sugar taxes or banning sugar from food stamps is patriarchal. They convince themselves. I did it. Again, the food companies, they think they're feeding America. They think, they've relied on these studies saying calorie in, calorie out, those type of things. I will say, I do think it's changing a little bit. Let's talk about medical systems, because I'm writing a book with my sister who's really influenced me on this, Dr. Calley Means, who dropped out of surgery and went to Stanford Med School, kind of was the pride of the family, realized everything she's doing surgery on is related to inflammation and metabolic health, realized she didn't didn't take one nutrition class at Stanford Med School. They don't offer it. And started this company, Levels, to help people measure their metabolic health. Through her and now through doctors that are reaching out to me, there is a knowledge that things aren't working. Actually, if you look at the medical profession, it's one of the highest burnout, dropout rates. It's one of the highest suicide rates, unfortunately. It's one of the highest rates of depression. It's multiple times more than the average population. I believe that's because the medical system takes the best and brightest of the world who go in for the right reasons. And it is obvious to anyone in a hospital that patients aren't getting better. Yeah. So I do think people feel very trapped. I think there's that one end of the spectrum. There's the other end of the spectrum. A lot of people attack me on Twitter. The head of endocrinology and hormone disorders at UCSF, one of the leaders there is like, well, we're helping people. People are making bad decisions, and we're here to help. And that perfectly encapsulates what people think. And I think they really do think that in the head. They think that the American people are lazy. They think that they're going to eat terrible things, and they're there to clean up the mess. That's such a convenient way to think, when there's trillions of dollars of, there's tens of billions of dollars of farm subsidies subsidizing sugar and processed grains, where healthcare only kicks in once you get sick, which is lobbied for by pharma, where we're getting completely ridiculous nutritional guidelines to eat Lucky Charms instead of beef. So it's very convenient to profit off that fact and just call Americans lazy. When I look outside, I see people suffering. I mean, people are overweight, clearly like diabetic, but I don't think people want that to be the case. I really do think it's like a very rigged system, and it's just so, in a way, evil to just wash your hands of it and say, well, this is what's going to happen. We're going to prescribe our drugs. We're going to do our, it's like we've got to ask why people are sick.
Yeah. It's become really easy to obfuscate responsibility in today's world, where Coke can just do what they do and then say we're going to try to do other good things, donate to the right causes, but then at the end of the day, they can just feel good about it.
That's the beauty of the system. The beauty, and I'd say this, from a system design standpoint, everyone can feel good about it. But somebody's got to be asking questions. And in my opinion, that should be the medical system. I like this is a crazy concept, but the foundation of medical, a medical institution like a hospital or public health institution should be how to keep people healthy. There's not a single institution asking why people are getting sick. If you ask a doctor who studies diabetes, they graduated from Harvard, I've done it. What's the underlying cause of diabetes? They literally can't explain the metabolic aspects. They see diabetes as a one-off condition. Diabetes is the foundation of what makes us sick. It's literally a cellular dysregulation. 50% of the country's pre-diabetic or diabetic, 93% has an indicator of metabolic dysfunction. Our cells are malfunctioning. Yes. And that's leading 99% of people with diabetes have at least one other condition. It's so the fact that we leading diabetes doctors, and even the American, the ADA, the American Diabetes Association, says that this is an isolated, disease to treat. That's so off. It's so profitable, but it's just like everything is connected. It's connected by food. It's if you cut sugar, seed oils, and highly processed grains, you basically wouldn't have prominent doctors have said this, Mark Hyman, other, you basically wouldn't have diabetes or heart disease, which is like a foundational to a lot of other diseases. So, yeah, got to wake up.
And then you have people like Dr. Gary Fettke out of Tasmania, who's a surgeon. He was so tired of seeing his diabetic patients losing their limbs and having to chop off their limbs that he starts talking to them about limiting their sugar and carbohydrate intake, gets completely persecuted by the medical board. He's at risk of losing his license. And then his wife, Belinda, is doing all this research, trying to help him with this case. And she finds out that there's emails from Coke telling the medical board to go after him. So it's just so interesting.
Well, this is another thing I saw. So like, literally you go to a consulting office, some of these public affairs consultants in DC, and the interns are pulling lists called lists of friendlies and basically creating a donation strategy. So this is what's really, just unbelievable when you peel back the onion. The American Diabetes Association credentials like doctors who treat diabetes. They can revoke the license. These are not like fringe organizations. The American Academy of Pediatrics credentials pediatricians, and they provide the guidance that if you go outside that guidance, you are at risk of losing your license. Like it is the gold standard. It's also like absolutely the unimpeachable advice for parents, right? And they accept food and pharma money. The American Academy of Pediatrics, it's right on the website. It's 90% funded by pharma, and they've accepted food money. And the American Diabetes Association has accepted millions of dollars from Coke, Cadbury, many other processed food companies. Until 2018, the official guidance of the American Diabetes Association was that as long as you took your insulin, you could eat whatever you want. Like literally whatever you want. You did not even need to limit your sugar intake. And what is so crazy about that is that if you're eating these inflammatory processed foods where sugar is going into your mitochondria at a rate 100 to 150x what it did 100 years ago, and it's being kicked out and turning into fat and being turned into diabetes is one problem. But like if you're not managing what you're putting in your body, you're going to have other issues, which is why there's all these comorbidities. And you had them saying that till 2018. You had the Coca-Cola logo on the ADA website, a Coca-Cola. And then the American Heart Association is even worse. Millions and millions of dollars to this day funded by food companies, by processed food companies. So you basically have these institutions that literally credential and make the paradigm of what doctors are supposed to follow being funded by food companies. I mean, it sounds almost so ridiculous you don't even believe it, but like, again, step one is just understanding this, like just understanding this and being able to ask a little bit more questions about this when your kid, they're saying your kid should have an injection for obesity.
I know that there are people that say, we've had a number of different endocrinologists on the show that love advocating for a low carb diet to treat type 2 diabetes. Has the ADA officially changed their stance at all and advocated or posted any content around the efficacy of a low carbohydrate diet?
Yeah. So you need to look at the website. They might have been pressured to pay a little bit more lip service to nutrition, but the profession of doctors that treat diabetes, and I can tell you just anecdotally from Twitter, it is very much drug based. It's very much innovation based. The way they flip the debate is that we're being heartless for saying that people should have nutrition. That's almost like classist. And that, there's all these people suffering, so they need well, yes, if somebody is really, diabetic, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have insulin. We've got to ask why so many people are diabetic. But yeah, no, the ADA is a total scandal. And I would just urge people to, dig into the idea that diabetes is an arbitrary marker of blood sugar dysregulation. There's nothing scientifically meaningful about the diabetes glucose measurement. It's on the spectrum of fasting glucose levels. There's this gaslighting, I believe, out there that, once you hit that level, it's totally non-reversible. It's totally, there's a lot of data that you can really get that level back down. I think everyone has hope. I think the process of learning about blood sugar dysregulation is going to dramatically lower, your risk for other diseases, including depression. And it's a great journey to be on. I mean, just a personal story. What really motivates me is my mom passed away from pancreatic cancer. She was perfectly healthy, got a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer in early 2021 and died 13 days later. And she was pre-diabetic, and that was caused by her pre-diabetes. 90% of people or so that have pancreatic cancer also have pre-diabetes or diabetes. It's really a metabolic condition. Mm. But in the year, it was too late for her. But I'll tell you, like, her really understanding these concepts, really working on her pre-diabetes in the years before that had a profound impact on me. And it really added to her life. And I really see her living in me and my sister because, just being on that journey, understanding your body, having more, curiosity and awe for how diabetes is connected to other diseases. It's like it had a profound impact on me, and we carry that forward. But I think we have to get to that. We have to understand how all of these diseases that we're, randomly experiencing are fundamentally tied to our cellular function, which is tied to food. And I just think there's a lot of interest trying to obfuscate that fact, including from the American Diabetes Association.
I can't help but like be inspired by like the mission and like story that like came out of that hardship. But I feel like between you and your sister, you guys are both drawing really interesting ways of going about solving the problem. Like, you're putting really good information out there, and she has this Levels product, which in my mind is kind of this technology of the future that allows people to bring health back under their own ability to decide, like, hey, what's good for me and what's not. Like, really do some research for yourself. That
Right.
can't. One of the problems I see in like the food system is we've outsourced all of our thinking to other people. Levels lets you real-time data on the food that you're putting in your body and see how it's affecting your mood, your sleep, your life in every aspect. So I think like just between the two of you, it's just an awesome story and mission.
Thanks, man. And just one insight from that is that there's dozens of U.S. states that still have laws preventing patients from getting their medical records. In many states, the medical system actually owns patient data. And I really think, as we've talked about, there's been this disempowerment of patients having awe and understanding for what's happening inside their body. So personally, there's a lot of talk about biowearables. There's a lot of biowearables right now. It's, some people say it's a bubble. I think the market will shake out, but I do think we're in the very early stages of understanding what's in our body. And I think in 10 years, I really think these biowearables are going to disrupt the doctor's office, because if you really understand, eventually like your glucose, your ketones, your hydration, you can actually like have really good data to actually know, hey, I should eat a little bit more meat today for these micronutrients, omega-3s that are going to help me with how I'm feeling. I need to drink a little bit more water. I need to get a little bit more sleep. Like that, I think, is the future. And I think we're very early innings on that. And I think it's all about patients having more understanding of what's going on in their body. Yeah.
It's one of those things too that kind of needs to start being private. It's like needs to be privately funded, because the legacy system is so captured by insurance, where insurance has no incentive to be like, yeah, we'll pay for your wearables so you're not going to the doctor.
Insurance is a big problem here. I mean, I again, talking to like leading health policy experts, they still say, well, insurance, yeah, they're incentivized for nutrition. That is not true.
Mm.
The incentives of insurance are that, according to the Affordable Care Act, right, there was this big populist thing, insurance are taking a 40% profit margin. So the Affordable Care Act put it at 15%. The insurance companies could only make 15% basically profit. They have to pay 85% out. So their profit is capped, right? That creates an incentive that they want the pie to be bigger. If you can only get 15%, you want the pie to be bigger. You want that number that makes that number higher. So there is absolutely no incentive. There's actually a reverse incentive for insurance companies wanting costs to be down or people to be healthier. Again, I have spoken to like C-suite at leading, a guy at a leading one of the COOs of a top 5 insurance company. Their child has diabetes. They're not evil people, but he also, and some of these executives that admitted to me, and they understand the incentives are absolutely screwed. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly what's happening. Premiums are going through the roof. People are getting more unhealthy. Anything from insurance, unless it's a fundamentally different insurance program on wellness or wearables, it is PR, and it is not an influence. And because it's just not, they'll lose money. So that insurance is a big problem.
What do you think is happening at a macro level where people are waking up to what's going on with our food system, insurance, flawed incentives. I'm sure you've been thinking about that with just how much your Twitter account has blown up in a very short period of time. It's something we spend a lot of time thinking about, but I'm just curious, what do you think's going on?
I think it's just reality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is my framework. I think people in their 20s, 30s, 40s two things are happening. They're looking at something a little off happening with their parents. Chronic diseases are all over the place. Our parents are less healthy than they should be. Life expectancy is declining for the most sustained period since 1860. It's going down way before COVID. So I think they're concerned about their parents, and I think it's looking at what's happening to kids. I mean, it is absolutely unacceptable what is happening to kids. 15% of high school seniors are on Adderall. SSRIs are rampant. Developmental issues are rampant. Depression's rampant. Suicide is the number 2 leading cause of death for a teenager. Autoimmune conditions, chronic conditions, obesity. I mean, it's like, I'm not, and I think many generations you look back and say are kind of pessimistic. There's something that's concerning that's happening with kids.
Yeah.
And I think that really makes it visceral and kind of demolishes any kind of partisan lens on this. I think there's so that's one. And number 2 is I think there's amazing content coming out. I mean, like when I got into this, read 20 books, listened to podcasts, I've listened to a lot of you guys, there's a lot of people from Joe Rogan to health podcasts to the left to the right. So I think people are waking up and reading books, listening to podcasts, the biowearable revolution. But yeah, I think what we have is not sustainable by definition. Like we're going to cease to exist as a country. And I don't think that's too hyperbolic to say. Like, we all know about the healthcare cost curve but it's true. Like healthcare is the largest industry in the United States, and it's the fastest growing. It will be 40% of GDP in like 15 years and bankrupt our country. Like that is mathematically true, and it's not slowing down, and everyone's getting sicker. So it's just like, it literally has to change, or we're going to cease to exist.
Yeah. And to your point, obesity is a visual representation of what's going on. So if 70% of Americans are overweight or obese, regardless, I think a lot of people, they might not necessarily know how to correct that, but they at least realize, okay, some shit is wrong. This is not how we should be living. Even with children, I think it's 40% of kids are overweight or obese, and now 1 in 10 have fatty liver disease. So even if you don't necessarily know the right diet to correct it or understand how to eat real foods, to your point, it's like you'd think the average person is like, okay, this is not right. Why is everyone fat?
If you are obese, if someone is obese, they're going to live a shorter life. They're going to have more chronic conditions. They're going to be much highly receptive to depression. Why is that? Because it is a visual representation of metabolic dysfunction. It is a symptom. It is literally, right? Our cells are overwhelmed with glucose, with sugar, with processed grains. The mitochondria can't process it, kicks it out, and the sugar turns into fat. But that excess blood sugar also goes other places. It goes to the liver, goes to the brain. It actually causes a lot of like organ dysfunction. So the fact that, obesity, that's one of the least concerning symptoms. I mean, this is causing 15% of kids to have fatty liver disease. That used to be a disease insane. Only for alcoholics.
15%?
15% of children, according to the CDC.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I think is really nefarious and gets to kind of the playbook I saw earlier in my career is that you have Nestle and the American Beverage Association and other front groups paying TikTok influencers, body positivity influencers, to do this gaslighting that, healthy at any size. And then you have, 60 Minutes, the most watched news program in the United States, which relies on more than 50% of their ad funding for pharma, runs a segment with pharma ads before and after the segment, sponsored by Pfizer, saying that obesity is a genetic condition, even though it's a new phenomenon in the past 50 years. It is absolutely insane. It's not, listen, let's be very clear. I'm a free market guy. I'm a personal choice guy. I don't think what's happening is personal choice. I don't think it's lazy Americans. I think the fact that 80% of Americans are overweight, they don't want to be overweight.
No.
I've struggled, like we all, it's like, it is a systemic problem that we need to call out. And I think what we need to do, is rally around that. Our system's being rigged against us. It's not about people being lazy. We need to think about changing the system.
What do you think about people who would hear this conversation and be like, this all sounds pretty conspiratorial, but there's so much evidence to just say, just to basically place out a great argument why, yeah, the conspiracy is basically us saying the system now has 93% of people, and the system, what I mean is like, obviously people have their own choice, but the system itself is driving a lot of these incentives. So 93% of people are metabolically dysfunctional. Like, that's not really a conspiracy theory. That's not really up for debate.
Yeah, I mean, I urge people to just follow the money and use common sense. I'd say that, hopefully these stories about weaponizing institutions of trust are resonant. Let's not talk conspiracies. Let's just talk facts. I'll say one fact, and I think this is empirically true. The medicalization of chronic conditions in the past 50 years has been an absolute cataclysm. Like, the purpose of chronic disease treatment should be to lower rates of those chronic diseases. What has happened? We prescribe more statins, heart disease explodes. We prescribe more metformin, the rates of diabetes has gone up 700x in a generation and a half. We prescribe more SSRIs, depression and suicide is off the charts. Does anyone think that this new obesity, this miracle obesity cure, which, by the way, if you go off weekly injections, you double your weight, you gain more weight than you once had, and it causes a million other side effects. Does anyone think long-term that hack is gonna lower obesity in this country? Like the record, it's not conspiratorial. The record of chronic disease management in this country has been an absolute failure. In most other industries, right? In most other industries, higher costs this is what I'm trying to say. In healthcare, higher costs have been associated with worse outcomes. The more we spend, the worse the outcomes go. That makes sense.
Right.
And in most industries, you don't stand for that, but in healthcare, it's bankrupting us.
Calley, I can't help when you're speaking but to think about my dad during this conversation. He's 59, generally healthy guy, played college baseball. But I think he would tell you, he's like, hey, I think I could probably lose like 20 pounds. He's on a statin. And I think about, and I know for a fact that he just eats too many carbs, too much sugar, breads, pastas, all that stuff. And I think he's very interested in a lot of the stuff that we're doing and talking about. He would like to experiment on a carnivore diet or a low carb diet, but he's so worried about his LDL cholesterol and he's on a statin. So I just think about how many Americans there are like him that would maybe want to go down the alternative health rabbit hole, but are so worried about this one metric, this one LDL number, when there's so many other things that are even more indicative of your actual health, whether it's waist size, resting blood sugar, some of the other things that you'd mentioned. It's just, I don't know, it's just interesting to think about.
Well, it's been weaponized in that respect, right? We've obsessed people over this one metric for, heart conditions and cardiovascular, which I'm sure you guys have covered. Is really, a lot of the way we think about cholesterol is totally off, right? And it's just wrong. But it's really scary. Yes. I totally get that. To like go outside what the doctor's saying, it's like you're at risk of, having some cardiovascular issue. It's really scary. Again, going back to being inspired by my mom in her final years and things like that. I think there's real value, and it seems like your dad's on this, in being curious, and pulling the strings. And, that could lead you to books on functional medicine, and it could lead you to books by doctors who've spoken out. It can lead you to podcasts. On the systemic issues, Mark Hyman's really inspired me. Andrew Huberman's doing a lot these days, and you can agree or disagree with different people. I'm sure you guys do, but then it might lead you to a functional medicine doctor, and to get a different opinion. That functional medicine doctor might, and I'd highly recommend everyone to do this. Right, especially if you're really facing some imminent or concerning issues, like really go to a functional medicine doctor. It's a couple $100, and you can get really, really in-depth lab tests that really break down your different cholesterol levels and help you understand them better. And then you can make your own decision. But I would just say this idea that breaking outside of the current system with, heart disease exploding and all these, I think it's less risky than you might think, because it's really not working what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that saddens me about this whole conversation is you mentioned the date 1970, which is when the guidelines around nutrition came out. And that's really when we saw like a massive rise in a lot of highly processed products getting marketed to all sorts of people, but specifically kids. And one of the things we talk about is just like the predatory nature of a lot of this marketing that gets thrown in front of kids' face. Like, they're not even seeing real food on any of the programming that they're seeing. They're seeing highly processed garbage that shouldn't even be put in their body. but these companies are still able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty shameful when you look at Viacom, how much they've lobbied the FTC to keep those ads up there. When you look at the percentage of advertisements on kids' networks, that's food, it's like off the charts. Again, it sounds corny. I mean, I was going on, I'm just on vacation in Santa Fe, do that tweet, and Tucker Carlson's producer DMs me on Twitter. I'm on Tucker that night, the most watched news show, kind of controversial, but I really felt strongly to do it, to try to get this message out to the largest audience in cable. I was, it was very quick. I was a little nervous, and I literally was just like wrote down my son's name on a piece of paper, and I want to just stay grounded in that as we build this company, and like Justin, who you guys know, and me try to communicate this. It's not about dunking on food companies. Like, kids are on the chopping block. Mm-hmm. like there's dollar signs on their heads. I mean, we advertise this addictive food, the most well-meaning parents, right? They're trying to buy it. There's these snuck processed grains, they sneak the sugar in, they get addicted. If they give any of us highly addictive drugs every single morning, we're going to get addicted. Totally. Like there's not but you look at kids at a birthday party, 3-year-olds with a cake, they look like a bunch of meth addicts.
Yeah, 100%.
And they basically essentially are the same dopamine dynamics are going on in their brain. So I think it's like tragic. And then their bodies and their cells are out of control. And then we're telling them to take SSRIs. We're telling them to take Ozempic. We're telling them to take Adderall. It's like, it really is like it's like violence to these kids.
Yeah. And we're almost moving into like the third generation, we're like 50 years removed from those guidelines being put in place. And we're almost like the third generation into that, which I think like plays into how this whole thing unfolds to the point where we're at 93% of people being metabolically unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you guys talk about being despondent or being, I think this is a good question, a good frame, and I'll just tell my thought on it, because it is very depressing. I think I mentioned to you guys, I'm helping my sister, Calley Means, write a book, and we're writing a book about these concepts. It's going to be published by Penguin, hopefully next year. Books take a while, but our first draft was very pessimistic and kind of a diatribe. And our agent, who was great, was like, Americans don't want to hear this. And he kind of challenges. He's like, is this even true? Like, you guys are writing a book, people are waking up. And I actually, like, through that advice, but also just through thinking about this last year, it is really tragic. I think it's an existential issue. We need to get it right. We're going to cease to exist as a country if we let all of our kids, just, as you said, it's like generational. And then, if most of the country has these issues, it's just going to keep going. But I think there's room for optimism. I really do. Like, absolutely. We're sitting here talking about it. You guys are devoting your lives to it. Justin and I are trying to do that. Like, I'm meeting so many interesting people. So I think that's one strength of our system, is like, we have openness. We're able to talk about it. We're able to dunk on institutions, and people can make up their own minds. So I think people are waking up, but we've got to increase the momentum.
Yeah, it's tragic, but we could definitely pull back from the brink. Like, even just your tweet going so viral, how can you not be optimistic about that? Tucker Carlson getting you on a show to be able to discuss topics like this. These are big steps in the right direction. Even threads that we've written, it's like people have an appetite for this stuff, which is amazing. And it goes back to what you were saying. It's like curiosity is the first step to be able to actually have change in this space.
Your guys' threads have had a huge impact on me, and I just, have helped push me, you guys being out there in the arena to help talk about this and share perspectives. And Tucker is kind of controversial, but I feel so grateful, that, and kind of surprised that, I never thought nutrition would be such a resonant issue on the right. It's kind of been an issue on the left, but like, I am very happy that I was able to do that. And they've been covering that every single night, to their credit. I mean, food companies and pharma companies spend a lot on news programs. And there seems to be something resonating on a bipartisan way on this rigged food system nutrition issue. So I think it's really important and admirable that both the right and the left are talking about this, because something off is happening.
I think like these crises kind of breed missionaries, which... Missionaries are unwavering in their belief and to make, their life's work come to fruition. And I think that sort of power is kind of what we need to reverse all these numbers, and I totally believe we can do it. I think like the human spirit is something that like as soon as enough people get involved, like that's when the party happens and people start feeling good about being healthier and actually like the positive change that can happen with just a few. Like imagine if we back that number off 93% down to like 80%, 70% over the next decade or handful of decades through these technologies and information that's being shared. I mean, that would be amazing. I think that would unlock a lot of amazing human ingenuity.
100%. And I'm particularly passionate and have hope, but also fear for kids, as I said. But I think the highest leverage point, I think a lot of parents are looking for answers here, but the high leverage point is kids. I mean, I think it's crazy, right? It's like, you know, kids are born metabolic dysfunctional. Kids are born metabolic dysfunctional. You know, my sister and I were born 12 pounds. You know, my sister had a bunch of ear infections and was pounded with antibiotics by the time she was 2. And a lot of kids are like that too. So you're
Same.
born metabolically dysfunctional, you know, overweight, you know, pounded with antibiotics, like destroying your microbiome, you know, eating inflammatory foods, you know, not getting sunlight, which is essential, right? You know, not getting as much movement as you should. It's like, I hate to say it, and it's kind of taboo to say this, but that is really setting, you know, kids up for lack of success. You know, it's very important those first couple of years. So I'm passionate about that. And I think a lot of parents are looking for answers. And I think it's very positive for parents to be questioning significantly what the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying and kind of the conventional wisdom. I personally think there's just no reason whatsoever for a child, you know, who's 1, 2, you know, but when you're really controlling what they're eating, to be eating any sugar, processed grains, or inflammatory oils, which is what most children's food is loaded with. It's just like, it's unconscionable to me. Yeah.
It's such an important point to what you're saying, because I do think that there is a misconception or a lack of knowledge with parents that they don't understand that them not taking care of themselves is actually affecting the genetics of their child, right? I think that there are a lot of people that think, okay, even if I don't take care of myself, I'm not going to pass any of that on to my children. And that's completely not the case at all. I forget, I think Rhonda Patrick shared some study on Twitter. You might know what the study is called, where she kind of unpacks all of that. I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, imagine if you could really spread this message and people understood that taking care of themselves is going to create a healthier child and what that would do to parents.
Well, that message isn't going to be spread because there's a highly competitive market in birthing places and hospitals, and it's all based on patient satisfaction. So we actually had a conversation with a nurse at a leading hospital in Phoenix, and she said, you know, the vast majority of moms are you know, obese and no, that they would never say anything like that. That would be, you know, there would be a TikTok about fat shaming. So some of these messages can't get out. And again, we need to be very clear here. I really don't think this is actually, and I've grown on this, like it's we shouldn't see this as an individual failing. This is systemically happening. It's a systemic failing, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it or explore. And I think a lot of people that are overweight are dealing with metabolic dysfunction. I've had, you know, health issues based on my own, you know, behavior, right? It's like we all do. It's like I think most of them still want to talk about it. I think most people that are overweight actually want to like be healthy. They want to like have their kids be healthy, but we've totally stunted debate on this. And again, I think just learning from my sister, doctors are rated, right? Like after you talk to a patient, like they take a survey and then doctors are reprimanded if they get bad grades. So there's this incentive to not really challenge the patient. It's like totally a perverse incentives. So that message isn't really getting out. But yeah, it's leading to metabolic dysfunction in utero, and setting kids up not for success.
We had a guy, Mike Collins, on our podcast, and he's known as the sugar-free man. And he was really interesting because he took prenatal nutrition very seriously with his wife after he battled addiction like his entire life with sugar and other things. And he noticed that his kids, after really being mindful about how much sugar his wife was eating, how much sugar he was eating when they were conceiving, and he noticed his kids just were not that susceptible to all the different dopamine. And obviously some of that is from the parenting, but they weren't as susceptible to all the different dopamine hits that you can get nowadays, which is, I think, part of the problem. Like dopamine overload is just everywhere.
It's a huge problem. And I think you have an ability in those early years when the brain, you do dive into the research in the brain, how malleable it is. And I think it's, it's the basis of psychology, how much is really hardwired into, a child in those first couple of years. Again, it's not to sound too morbid and things are reversible, but like that leverage of those first couple of years of hardwiring those. And I link, you can link it really to a lot of things. It's like really the key mechanism is dopamine. I think the child's brain is being assaulted from all angles. And I really put the sugar in the same vein as the chronic stress driven by social media, to even like porn. I mean,
Yes.
Again, like all these things, like, it's not like we should ban them. It's not like they're like 100%, but we should just be aware. I wrote this one thing, a formulation I have is that, we're all on drugs. Like we really like live our lives, like going from dopamine hit to dopamine hit, from a coffee, to an Adderall. There's 17 prescriptions per adult in the United States prescribed per year, to, many people take opioids, to beer, to porn, to social media. We're really like going from dopamine hit to dopamine hit. And I think really like what we're told is a good drug and a bad drug is like actually in many ways backwards.
Yes.
Like Adderall, this crazy book Blitzed. It's just like, this is like, that was a less effective form of Adderall that the Nazis created to make German soldiers like fight longer. And they discontinued it because it made them psychotic. Yes. And then we took a stronger version and now that's what 15% of kids take. So it's just like, and it's one molecule away from crystal meth. So it's like, okay, that's like making people more attractive. Then 25% of the American population is on an SSRI, which again, friends take them, family take, it's just like, they do numb you, right? They're numbing it. So we have a numbing agents, we have aggressive drugs, we have alcohol to numb you out. And then the drugs that are totally stigmatized, like MDMA and psilocybin, there's research showing that they're the most highly effective substances or interventions ever studied to reverse depression, increase empathy, very low side effects, to get people tuned in to their self-actualization and their trauma and really come to terms with that. So that substance is banned, and we have, opioids and alcohol. So I actually I don't think drugs are in and of themselves are even bad. I just think that this is one thing I'm going to try to teach my son is like, understanding your dopamine response is probably the most important thing you can do as a human. Like just understanding that's what drives us.
Totally.
And I love drinking. Like sometimes, like I've met my wife when we were drinking. Like I've had some of the best like bonding experience with my friends. Like, but it's just like, let's be aware. Just be aware. Like there's so many drugs out there that aren't labeled as drugs, and we just I think going down that rabbit hole is very important for everyone to understand.
Mm-hmm. And you understand your relationship to alcohol too, which is a really important thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just being thoughtful about it, being thoughtful that, and not taking society's definition of drugs. It's just like, it's pretty much backwards.
100%.
It's pretty much backwards when you think about it.
Yeah.
And our food has been drugged, which it literally, I mean, I believe sugar is the worst drug because it doesn't cause you to be like incredibly high. Like, I mean, the fact that it's more subtle actually makes it more dangerous. Mm-hmm. I actually think there is a lot of data that sugar is the most destructive drug in the country because it's really subtle, but it's very addictive, and it's in food. So
yeah, we live in a world where we've normalized giving our kids goldfish crackers and Pop-Tarts before class. They can't pay attention, and then you get them on Adderall, and then it's just the whole merry-go-round for the rest of their lives.
That's right.
I'm 28, Harry's 29, so we're kind of in that generation where we had friends that started going on these drugs when they were 10, 12 years old, and now they have an inability to be able to perform any type of work without taking a drug like that. It's so hardwired into their behavior.
Right. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was kind of the research behind a lot of these medical institutions and a lot of those studies. Like if you look at a graph at the amount of studies that have been put out recently, it's exponential growth, literally an exponential growth curve for the amount of studies, which is curious to me. Like, why are we producing all of these studies? What's happening? And I think it goes back to a lot of what you were talking about earlier. And you kind of pinpointed the medical institutions as really like the problem of a lot of this. So I'm curious, like what's driving a lot of those research studies from your perspective?
Corruption. Going back to what I saw with Coke and pharma, there are, pharma just on lobbying spends $350 or so million a year, 3 times more than any other industry, multiples more than oil. And there are people sitting around very strategically thinking about how to hijack levers of trust and institutions of trust. And we still fall for this game where if the news reports a peer-reviewed study, that we all say that's unimpeachable and that's good. I think it is personal. This is my personal opinion digging into this. I think it is absurd that there are hundreds of nutrition schools and millions and millions of dollars spent on nutrition research that's almost entirely funded by corporate interests, right? To like argue some like niche to get processed food sold. It's like, don't eat added sugar, don't eat seed oils, don't eat highly processed grains. I think that's a start like to like getting you towards, and then, that basically gets you to Whole Foods.
Yeah.
And then for me, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but like, I think, the true like thoughtful carnivore folks, are, to me, actually, the concentric circles overlap a lot with like good, even plant-based, because it's like hunt for the right nutrients, like hunt for like, don't eat processed crap, hunt for the right nutrients. It's like, it's about like the substance of the food.
Nutrient density.
It's about the nutrient. Yeah. And I think you guys make a lot of good points on that. It's just like, forget even, I think even some of the debates about dietary philosophies it's like search, like food is information.
Yeah.
It's like giving ourselves information.
Totally.
It's like, and you can kind of just trace evolution of like what people used to eat, like what our body evolution. And it's just like, it's actually not that complicated. If you go on that journey and just cut these highly inflammatory processed ingredients out of your, so I don't understand what the billions of dollars is going into other than just rigging the system, producing studies from Harvard saying that sugar doesn't cause obesity. I mean, it's just absurd on its face. And then I think we've really lost our way on the drug thing. I mean, I think it's just like this giddy excitement, the JP Morgan conference, the big healthcare conference, what was it, this week or last week? They were giddily. I mean, it was the videos from this, they were giddy with excitement about the secular trends on Alzheimer's, on obesity, on diet.
Yeah.
It was like hooray. It was cheering. Everyone in that conference was talking about how we're going to weather through this recession because our trends are good. Not one person's talking about what's actually causing this. It's just all these little treatments, all this little research. And then the problem is that healthcare is the largest industry in the country. So the majority of US states, the largest employer of those states is a hospital. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, that's able to buy off politicians because it's jobs, jobs, jobs. So I was in Texas recently, hearing the governor of Texas, who's done some good things, but he was talking, and he was bragging that the Texas Medical Center in Houston could be seen from space. And how many jobs that created. That's not a good thing.
No.
It's not a good thing that we need hospitals that can be seen from space. No. That's not innovation, but it's good, that even conservatives are like, oh, it's jobs. But like there's something, it's the system. It's not good.
I love what you were saying earlier about carnivore. And that was actually one of the questions I had for you, is how you and your sister think about like the power of anecdote versus a peer-reviewed study. Because I think a lot about, what's made carnivore such an effective thing is it's given people the ability to connect and realize, hey, look, there's 25 million people in the US right now that suffer from an autoimmune disease. Yet a lot of these diseases are effectively healing. The incurable is becoming curable through nourishing your body from animal fats. But a lot of us are finding out about this diet not from a peer-reviewed study. They're finding out about it from Instagram, from YouTube, from connecting with someone else that suffered from IBS and tried this diet, and it worked really well for them. So I'm just curious, especially with you and your sister's perspective, like how do you think about the power of anecdote versus a peer-reviewed study?
I mean, I'll just say this. I think the most important scientific thinker in the United States, and I would say the greatest defender of the scientific method, is Joe Rogan. And I'll just say that. I mean, I'm a dude and like Joe Rogan, that might be expected, but like that man is asking questions. That man is like exhibiting the scientific method, like in a very public form. And I think this has been a journey I've been on, right? But it's just like, you can ask questions, like you can figure out what makes sense or what doesn't make sense. You know, if you see a study from Harvard that says sugar doesn't cause obesity, you're able to question that. That study was jammed down our throats and led to 25% childhood obesity, or excuse me, childhood prediabetes. like we've got to question institutions. And I can tell you again, from being in the room with Coke, from having a little bit of insight into these academic institutions, some of them, they are PR entities for special interests. Like, they don't convince themselves of that, but the money's being paid for something. The billions of dollars of money is being paid for something. So yeah, man, like I think we can just ask our own question. And I don't think it's like, you know, you get gaslit to say it's dangerous to go outside the system. And I just think we, that this wave of influencers, what you guys are doing, you know, up to Joe Rogan, up to, you know, doctors who are doing podcasts and kind of question the system. I think it's much more powerful and having much more impact than a lot of peer-reviewed research. And I think if there's one of the lessons I hope people take away and is, don't trust peer-reviewed research.
Yes.
Well, what a terrible precedent to set too. Like, no, you can't figure this out for yourself.
That's what people are being told.
Come on. Where have you found yourself changing your thinking around some of these topics, going down this rabbit hole?
Oh yeah. I mean, I grew up, you know, I think I'm a free market guy. I'm a libertarian. And I think the conservative side has been gaslit to think that questioning pharma companies or questioning processed food companies is anti-free market. And what a big transition from, so I used to be a big defender of medical innovation and a big defender of like the, you know, genius of the American food system. And I was very like pro, like, you know, I consider myself pro corporation, right? But you don't have a free market if the free market is rigged. And that's been a big eye opener for me. It is absolute weaponization of conservative principles to defend Coke when they've rigged the system tens of billions of dollars. Like, that's delegitimizing the system. And I think, you know, again, this issue very much supersedes politics. It's like, it's really truly not partisan. It's like the system is just being rigged by corporate interests. And unfortunately, those corporate interests are paying off institutions on the left and the right, including prominent civil rights groups, you know, to achieve the end result is evil. It's diabetic children. So that's been a big thing for me. Just really, we do really have a rigged system, and being much more skeptical of companies. Now, again, Coke should exist. I think most drugs should be legal. I don't think most of them should be subsidized with the U.S., you know, tens of billions of dollars of medical. The other thing I just say real quick is just my framework has always been like public policy. What's the highest leverage public policy? And I've been, you know, always involved in the latest political debate in Washington, the latest hot topic. I think we're being totally distracted. I think there's a first order issue right now, which we're exponentially getting sicker, fatter, more depressed, more infertile. And I think we're really being distracted from that issue. When you think about public policy, when you think about the happiness of Americans and the human capital of Americans, if their brain cells are literally malfunctioning, which is what diabetes is, that's a problem. That's a first order issue. It's like, if we solve that, we're going to have our human capital being happier, making better decisions. So to me, it's kind of obvious now, but it's like, it took me a while to get there.
I know that you mentioned that you appeared on Tucker Carlson. Are you seeing interest from conservative and liberal news outlets, or is it more weighted in one direction than the other?
Yeah, I'm blown away, honestly, because I really do. To me, this what excites me about and why I want to devote my life to this is it crosses partisan lines. It really isn't a partisan issue. It's like, you know, I tweeted about the fact that we subsidize $10 billion of sugary drinks for low-income children. It's truly heartbreaking. Like, it's like most people I think would agree with that. The Tucker and a lot of the conservative outlets have picked it up, and it's been very surprising because nutrition generally has been associated with an issue of the left. I think viewers and people from both sides are very frustrated with what's happening with the rigged system and looking at their kids. And the mainstream outlets haven't picked it up as much. There's been a lot of reports talking about food and pharma being the two largest funders of news. but I want to carry this message anywhere. But like it is interesting, and I think it's undeniable that traditional media that depends on advertising dollars from large organizations, which inevitably falls to pharma, that influences editorial decision making.
Mm-hmm. This is a pure observation, but what I will tell you is that when I look at our largest followers on Twitter that have 1 million plus accounts, they're all conservatives. And so I'm just gonna.
It's interesting.
It's interesting, and I haven't seen the same from the left. So I don't know why that is, but that's just an observation with my Twitter account.
I think we speak for both people that I think all feel very passionate about this issue. Mm-hmm, and totally. I think it's double-edged. I think in some degree it's great that this message is getting out to all communities, especially communities you might not have heard it, conservative communities. And secondly, I mean, my personal opinion is the debate's been weaponized a little bit. I mean, I think for some reason it's become a political virtue in some circles to blindly trust pharmaceutical companies, which I think they deserve none. And then I think that the same kind of tactics I'm talking about have been used very successfully, to advance this healthy at any size movement and advance this idea that it's not appropriate to talk about obesity really, which I think is only hurting people.
It really feels like there's a lot of political theater out there, and health should be an apolitical topic, right? Like, I don't care where you stand on certain issues, but health is one where it's like, yeah, everyone should be as healthy as they can possibly be.
Yeah, I think one of the political calculations potentially is that the majority of people are obese, so there's the voters, so we might as well cater to that. I think that that's a mistake, and I think it's wrong, because I think most people actually do want to be healthy and want to be there for milestones for their kids and grandkids. So and just mathematically and just factually, like Ozempic is not going to, I almost guarantee you, affect life expectancy that much, right? It's like obesity again. It's like a sign that there's a problem. Mm-hmm. It's like we're writing about this a little bit in the book, but my mom, like most Americans, right, in the past 30 years has had high cholesterol, statin, high elevated glucose, metformin, et cetera, like most Americans. Like these drugs are prescribed like candy. Not once is it like, hey, this is a gestational diabetes on down. Never is it. This is a potential warning sign. Mm-hmm. This is going to keep cascading up to cancer, up to Alzheimer's. Nowhere was she told, or our patients told, hey, like these actually should be like welcome. Like these should be like childhood obesity. It's like, oh, let's get this under control, because if you don't get the core down, it's just not going to work. So it's really kind of cruel what we're doing.
Yeah. I think when all is said and done, we will look back on big sugar like we look back on big tobacco. And like, if you have a friend that's a smoker, like if I have a buddy that's smoking a cigarette, I would literally just be like, you're a moron. Why are you, know it's going to cause cancer.
Right.
And it's like, in theory, if you have a friend that's overweight or obese, it's like, you just feel like you can't say that same thing to them. Like, you can't just be like, dude, put down the burger, you're literally killing yourself, or put down the sugar, you're killing yourself. It's like, there's just so much, it's a very difficult issue, because there's a lot of emotion around weight, and you want them to be healthy, and these people do want to be healthy. But at the same time, being healthy, that if they eat like this, they are going to kill themselves. So you don't know, it's a very touchy thing, is my point.
100%. But yeah, we're chipping away. I see myself as a foot soldier with the fight with you guys and thousands of other people I think we respect. And and that's how you have societal change. I think time is of the essence, but I do hope, again, before we even talk about any type of bans or taxes, I don't think we even need, let's just stop subsidizing this crap.
Yes.
Let's stop subsidizing tens of billions of dollars of grain subsidies, food stamps. Let's potentially use the valid legal and congressional investigation channels to determine whether these companies have knowingly, misled or inflicted knowing damage on the American people. And I really do hope Coke, through free market tools, becomes like a cigarette.
Where are you seeing sort of optimism in the world? Because it seems like there's so much negative news out there.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I get a lot of energy from, honestly, I think the podcast, what's happening right now, is a revolution in the country. I think it's one of the most historical trend of free thinkers out there talking. I personally think Joe Rogan is probably the historical figure of our time right now. The most popular listened to program of somebody independent thinking, taking mushrooms and trying to explore the world. I mean, I think I actually think it's very inspiring. Talking about how to be a better person, how to have better habits, and then different forces are actually trying to like delegitimize and tear that down. To me, it's actually fascinating. And on down throughout the whole podcast ecosystem of people, I think there's a lot of critical thinking. And I think the fact that so many people are listening to podcasts, that actually gives me a lot of hope. I mean, there's one policy area, Justin and I are working on this company. We kind of asked this question. Justin Mares, who's been on your guys' program before, and I are working on this, but I was despondent, a year ago. I was kind of like digging down this rabbit hole. I'm like, man, like we're screwed. And then met Justin, who started Kettle and Fire, Perfect Keto, really tried to be part of the change on the food system, pass those companies off, was thinking about what to do next. And we just talked for months about the question of how do you change incentives. And there's one thing we landed on, which is these HSA, FSA accounts. So there's $140 billion in them. Most people have these accounts. So you probably ignore them. Justin and I always it's like, totally. that's we're going to get sick and lose. If I don't get sick and I lose that money. What actually you can do with those accounts is buy food or exercise. Food or exercise is medicine, and you can use those accounts for qualified expenses that help you prevent disease. But it just requires a doctor's note to say food or exercise helps prevent disease. Wow. But most of us are at urgent need to prevent diabetes, heart disease, other metabolic conditions. So for qualified folks, we seamlessly provide that. And then you're able to actually buy food at a tax advantage way, 30, 40% savings, whatever your income tax is. So we're really excited about that. And it's one tool, it's not the panacea, but like we have to move policy to food as medicine. We have to be like a piece of pasture raised, high quality meat or depending on your philosophy, we can go into, which foods, but there are nutrients and antioxidants in food that is unquestionably, scientifically, the best possible medicine to prevent or reverse disease. And it's totally within the fairway to prescribe that. So that's one thing I'm just kind of optimistic on in the next 10 years. I actually think mathematically we have to move to more using our healthcare systems to subsidize and promote food, because we're just not going to. We talked about the math problem, how we're just going to go bankrupt. We will not drug our way out of the situation. At one time or another, we're going to have to realize that it's going to have to be about food, and public policy can incentivize food. We say it's just inevitable that people are going to make bad decisions. That's ridiculous. Like if we incentivized people to exercise, if we took the $4 trillion that we spend on healthcare and asked Blue Sky, how do we use that to incentivize healthy behaviors, healthy food, we transform the country. Like if we do that competently. So that's what I'm excited about, and a trend we're pursuing with this new company, True Medicine.
Beautiful. And with True Medicine, are you identifying what those healthy foods actually are that you can use your HSA dollars towards?
Yeah, this might be obvious to some people, but we have 5,000 peer-reviewed studies on food as medicine. So for any condition you're trying to prevent or reverse, every single food we recommend is backed by multiple studies showing that the specific elements of those food, the antioxidants, the fiber, the macronutrients, the micronutrients, are scientifically proven to either prevent or reverse that condition. So the food is very much, and then we have a clinical team. It's all, walled off, and doctors, approve the patients and then make the recommendations. So these are medical plans. And then, it kind of gets into an interesting discussion, right? It's like depression. There's multiple studies showing that 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week for 3 months is more effective than leading SSRI. So we have that study. There's resounding science on that. And I know we've questioned studies before, and everyone needs to think critically about this stuff. But if we're going in the world of studies, it's very clear that exercise is a powerful medicine for depression and many other conditions, as you guys know. And we have studies saying that. So our doctors recommend that if necessary, and then you can purchase exercise or food or whatever's recommended in that note tax-free. So we're making that very seamless. TrueMed.com is our site, and And we're going to be launching in a couple months, really with the product aim and goal of making this as seamless as possible for qualified folks. But my hope is, for the community that really cares about it, I hopefully, feel that using your HSA, using these, systems of the existing system to stay healthy is an act of rebellion almost against the existing system. And it's going to feel good. We've been testing it out. It feels good to use, these dollars that are kind of like sitting there waiting to go to pharma, to actually like on root cause solutions, to not just tackle one thing like diabetes, but actually to like improve, prevent that, but like improve your overall metabolic health too.
Do you guys see yourself working with companies like Levels to kind of like integrate different levels of information feedback with kind of the enabling of accessing those funds to make yourself better or healthier?
Yeah, I mean, first we hope to save people money and have Levels and Whoop and other biowearables as products, because I think that actually qualifies as medicine, and having that type of understanding of your metabolic health it can help a lot of people and could count potentially for this. But yes, that's the vision of the company. So I think you can imagine in a couple of years, right, that you have an app and it ties all your biosensor data. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like it knows how you're sleeping. It knows what your glucose is. It knows what your heart rate is. It knows what your recent blood tests were. It has data on what you're buying to eat, how much you're exercising. That type of program could give really personalized recommendations on, food, exercise, sleep aids, sauna, cold plunge, things that truly improve metabolic health in a highly, maybe even up to sparing amount of drugs. But that program would have so much more rich information than, and what we're doing, we're getting health information to tailor these notes for food as medicine. We have some idea what you're purchasing, and ideally we can, with the patient's consent, make, use that data to give really personalized. But I think that's where biowearables really need to go, and where it needs to connect to action. Totally. And that's the vision for our company, is like, this really is your ally in recommending items. I also think if you have that type of data, you can eventually get to the holy grail, which I think is like real analytics on when you're going to get a chronic disease. Like if you had an app that like with a 90% confidence interval said that you're going to get heart disease in 5 years if you don't take these certain actions, and you have a 0% if you take it's like, that would be and we could actually have that app where we actually like literally know, like with high confidence intervals, when we're going to get like certain conditions. Because I think one of the big problems is these chronic conditions seem so far away, but like we're brewing that metabolic dysfunction right now.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of what I take from our conversation today is we need to move quickly and act quickly, but it is possible to pull back from the brink through. And there are a lot of different levers that we can pull to be able to do that. But, we're encouraged by getting to connect and have conversations with people like you, and just people that like you that are spreading this message that's just so important, and it's encouraging to us. And we're just very appreciative of all the work that you're doing, and also being willing to come and sit with us on the show. It's been just such an eye-opening conversation.
So appreciative of you guys, and thank you for carrying this message. And this was great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Calley.